Welcome to NVL Travel Documentary. What if I told you the most dangerous thing in a city isn't crime, but silence? In a country known for maple leaves, mountain peaks, and a reputation for being one of the friendliest places on earth, something unexpected is happening behind closed doors. Canada, so often admired in every travel documentary, praised in lists of facts about countries for its peace, prosperity, and politeness, is facing a quiet unraveling. Because when a city grows too fast, when housing becomes a battleground, when neighbors become strangers, and when tents replace homes on city sidewalks, the result isn't just social decay. It becomes the perfect breeding ground for something darker. In today's country documentary by NVL Travel Documentary, we take you deep inside Canada's urban heart, not to show you tourist hotspots, but to explore what happens when connection collapses, when systems fail, and when crime quietly fills the void. This isn't the Canada you thought you knew. Stay with us. Number 1. The price tag of a dream. Let's be honest, buying a home in Canada today feels like a distant dream for a lot of people, especially in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, where prices have gone through the roof. According to the Canadian Real Estate Association, the average home price in early 2025 sits close to 800,000 Canadian dollars. That's not just a number, it's a reality that's pushing further away from the city center, where commutes are long and costs just keep piling up. Now, here's the kicker. While everything from groceries to gas is going up, wages have barely moved. Since 2016, average wage growth has hovered around 1 to 2% annually, and in 2025, it's projected to be only 3.5%. So, the math simply doesn't work out. Do you feel like your paycheck isn't keeping up either? Adding to the pressure, interest rates have climbed as the Bank of Canada tries to cool inflation. That means higher mortgage rates, which makes it harder than ever for young families or first-time buyers to even qualify for a loan. And as if that weren't enough, there's still a major shortage in housing supply. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says housing starts are slowing down, especially for affordable units and condos. Meanwhile, international investors are scooping up properties, especially in hot markets. In Vancouver alone, over 10% of real estate transactions last year were from foreign buyers. So while global money flows in, many locals are priced out. And let's talk about the harshest outcome of all, homelessness. In cities like Vancouver and Toronto, tent cities are no longer rare. But hey, this isn't just about numbers, it's about real people. Maybe it's even about you. So here's a question. Have you or someone you know been affected by this housing crisis? Would you consider moving to a smaller town or even leaving Canada just to afford a home? Drop your thoughts below. Number 2. Life on the edge of every paycheck. Let's talk about something that's hitting way too close to home for millions of Canadians, the rising cost of living. As of early 2025, inflation in Canada has crept back up to about 2.6%. Meanwhile, Average wage increases are crawling at around 3.4%, just barely keeping pace. But here's the thing, for most people it doesn't feel like a raise at all. Why? Because nearly everything essential to food, transportation, electricity is getting more expensive. According to Statistics Canada, food prices alone have jumped more than 6% compared to last year. And it's not just prices that are rising, it's debt too. A recent survey by MNP Ltd revealed that over 50% of Canadians are within $200 of not being able to pay their monthly bills. That's not a typo. That's one unexpected expense away from financial crisis. If that sounds like your situation, you're definitely not alone. Now let's add one more layer. During the pandemic, government support programs like CERB gave many families a much-needed safety net. But now that those supports are gone, people are being thrown back into an economy that hasn't fully recovered. Full-time workers, yes, even people working 40 hours a week, are still struggling to pay for rent, groceries, and childcare. The middle class is shrinking, and if you're wondering whether it's just you noticing fewer date nights, canceled vacations, and empty shopping carts, you're not imagining things. More and more families are cutting back on anything that isn't 100% essential. In fact, even streaming subscriptions are being dropped just to save a few dollars. So here's the real question. If you've had to cut back on spending just to stay afloat, hit 1 in the comments. If things are still stable for you, drop a 0. Let's get the conversation going, because when everyday people speak up, that's when change starts to happen. And honestly, it's time we stop pretending everything is fine, when clearly, it's not. Number 3, Maya's fall, when working still isn't enough. Last winter, in downtown Toronto, a 26-year-old named Maya sat bundled in a subway station, not because she was waiting for a train, but because she had nowhere else to go. A full-time worker with a college degree, Maya was priced out of her apartment after the rent jumped by 30% in less than 2 years. "I work, I try, but it's like the system just doesn't care," she said quietly. Maya's story isn't an isolated case, it's becoming the new normal, and it raises a tough question. If hard-working, educated young people like Maya are being left behind, who exactly is Canada working for? Let's talk mental health. According to the Canadian Mental Health Association, 1 in 5 Canadians now experiences a mental illness every year, and by age 40, nearly 1 in 2 will have faced a serious mental health issue. The numbers are even worse for youth. Between 2011 and 2025, diagnosed anxiety and depression in Canadians under 25 has more than doubled. At the same time, Canada's young people are reporting record low levels of happiness. In this year's World Happiness Report, Canada dropped to 18th place globally, but if you look only at people under 30, it plunges to below 50th. So why are young Canadians, living in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, so unhappy? Well, let's follow the trail. More and more of them are leaving. This quiet exodus is real. Young professionals are packing up and moving abroad, not for adventure, but for survival. They're chasing affordable housing, less financial pressure, and jobs that match their skills. Canada is now facing a slow brain drain, and it's no longer just about tech workers, teachers, nurses, and even tradespeople are saying goodbye. And then there's the inequality. If you own property, you're likely doing just fine, but if you rent, you've probably felt the squeeze. Homeowners in big cities have seen their equity soar, while renters are paying record-high prices with little hope of saving. That gap, it's not just financial, it's generational. Because like any explorer facing a tough climb, we need to pause, look around, and ask, are we heading toward the summit, or are we already sliding off the map? Number 4, too many people, not enough Canada. You might think that welcoming more people means a stronger, more vibrant country, and for a long time that was true for Canada. But in 2025, the cracks in that idea are starting to show, deep, visible, and impossible to ignore. Canada originally planned to bring in 550,000 new permanent residents this year, but faced with growing pressure, the federal government pulled back, revising that target to 395,000. Why? Because the country is running out of room. Not physically, but structurally. Last year, Canada's population grew by over 740,000 people. That's nearly double the population of Newfoundland, added in a single year. Meanwhile, our infrastructure, it stayed more or less the same. Roads remain congested, buses are packed, hospital wait times are longer than ever, and housing, well, let's talk about housing. Rents in major cities have soared. Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are now among the least affordable places to live in the world. It's not just because of immigration, but the numbers don't lie. With over 1 million international students in the country and hundreds of thousands of temporary foreign workers, demand is completely outpacing supply. One-bedroom apartments that cost $1,200 a few years ago now go for over $2,000. And that's if you're lucky enough to find one. At the same time, Canada's economy is slowing down. GDP growth in early 2025 sits below 1%. Population growth, close to 2%. That means we're growing faster than we're producing. And that imbalance hits hardest where it hurts. Schools, healthcare, transit, housing, all overwhelmed. Economists have been sounding the alarm. The Bank of Canada has warned repeatedly, without serious investment in infrastructure and housing, rapid immigration could fuel long-term housing inflation and deepen inequality. But here's the part most people miss. This isn't just an urban issue. Smaller cities like Halifax, Kelowna, and London are now feeling the squeeze. Rental shortages, higher food prices, and pressure on social services are spreading across the country. What used to be considered affordable is slipping further out of reach, even in places that once offered some relief. So now, Canada faces a defining choice. Do we scale back our ambitions, or finally build a system that can carry them? Because welcoming people is only the beginning. What comes next? Housing them, supporting them, giving them a fair shot? That's the real test of a country's strength, and right now, we're failing it. Number 5. Lost connections in crowded cities. There's something people don't often say out loud, but many are quietly feeling it. Canada's cities are full of people, but emptier than ever. It wasn't always like this. Canadians used to be proud of their communities. Friendly neighbors, backyard barbecues, weekend farmers markets, hallway hellos. Cities weren't just places to live, they were places to belong. But somewhere along the way, that feeling started to fade. Rising rents and housing insecurity have turned neighborhoods into revolving doors. People move so often, they barely have time to learn each other's names, let alone build real relationships. That longtime neighbor you could count on, they're long gone, replaced by someone new, who might be gone again next month. And the cost of living? It doesn't just eat away at your bank account, it eats away at your energy. When people are stretched thin financially, emotionally, mentally, they retreat. Doors close, not just physically but emotionally too. Trust gets replaced by caution. Familiarity turns into silence. For immigrants, young renters, and students, those already on the fringes of stability, this disconnection is even sharper. Many say they feel invisible. As one international student put it, "I live in a city of millions, but no one knows my name." It's not just loneliness, it's rootlessness. Sociologists are sounding the alarm. They say the breakdown of community ties doesn't just lead to sadness, it leads to anxiety, depression, and social disengagement. Without a sense of belonging, people stop participating, they stop believing they can make a difference. They just try to survive. One story haunts many who work in housing and community services. An elderly man in Montreal passed away alone in his 20th floor apartment. It took 3 days before anyone noticed. No neighbors knew his name, no one thought to knock on his door. He wasn't homeless, he had 4 walls and a roof, but he didn't have a community. And maybe that's the question we need to ask right now. What is a home if there's no one to come home to? The truth is, rebuilding connection doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes all it takes is a hello in the hallway, a short chat in the elevator, a knock on the door when something feels off. Because if we lose the ability to care for one another, then even if housing becomes affordable again, what we build won't be homes. They'll just be boxes. Number 6, the leadership gap. And when the pressure builds, all eyes turn to the top. So what has the Canadian government actually done in response to this growing crisis? The short answer? Not nearly enough. Despite mounting challenges, Ottawa continues to rely on vague promises and temporary fixes. Politicians hold press conferences, announce funding packages, and talk about future plans. But when you dig into the details, there's a clear pattern: small results and no long-term blueprint. It's like trying to plug a sinking ship with a handful of thumbtacks. Part of the problem is political gridlock. The federal government, under a Liberal NDP alliance, finds itself walking a tightrope. The New Democratic Party strongly opposes cuts to social programs, making it nearly impossible to reallocate funds or scale down spending, even when new investment is desperately needed in housing and infrastructure. This gridlock has created paralysis. Everyone agrees there's a housing emergency. Everyone agrees inflation is out of control. But no one seems willing to make hard decisions. Tax reform proposals aimed at curbing real estate speculation have been floated for years, especially targeting investors who own multiple properties and leave them empty. But they're either watered down or shelved entirely. Meanwhile, first-time homebuyers are still left out in the cold. Programs to support them exist, but they're complicated, underfunded, or simply too little too late. In cities where average home prices hover around $800,000, a small tax credit isn't going to change much. And Canadians are noticing. A growing wave of public frustration is rising. Across the country, polls show declining trust in federal leadership. People are tired of being told to be patient. They're tired of waiting for the next budget or the next election cycle to see real action. What they want is simple: housing they can afford, policies they can understand, and leadership that actually leads. Because when the gap between promise and performance grows wide enough, it becomes more than just a political issue. It becomes personal. It affects your rent, your commute, your kids' schools, your grocery bill. And the longer that gap is ignored, the more Canadians will stop asking for solutions and start demanding them. Number 7. So why aren't we acting on them? So where do we go from here? If the last few years have shown us anything, it's that the status quo won't fix itself. But that doesn't mean we're out of options. In fact, there are real, actionable solutions already on the table. What's needed now is the political will and collective effort to put them into motion. First, Canada needs to dramatically expand affordable housing. That means more than just announcements. It means shovels in the ground. Purpose-built rentals, non-profit housing, and co-op models all have a role to play. Experts from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation estimate we need over 5.8 million new homes by the year 2030 to restore affordability. That number is daunting, but with the right policies and partnerships, it's within reach. At the same time, tackling housing affordability means addressing speculation. One solution? A tax on second and vacant homes. Some provinces have already introduced similar measures, but implementation is uneven. Strengthening and harmonizing these policies nationally could discourage property hoarding and help stabilize rent prices, especially in hot markets where families are competing with investors for the same units. But housing alone won't solve the bigger picture. Wages need to keep up with the cost of living. In 2025, inflation is still hovering around 2.6%, while wage growth for many sectors is lagging. Aligning minimum wages with local living costs, especially in major cities, would help close that gap and bring relief to working Canadians. We also can't ignore the role of social support. Expanding programs like the Canada Child Benefit, increasing access to mental health care, and boosting direct aid to low-income households are critical tools not just to reduce poverty, but to ensure no one falls through the cracks in tough times. And while we fix what's broken, we must also build toward the future. That means investing in sustainable industries, clean energy, tech innovation, and green infrastructure. These sectors offer not only economic growth, but long-term career opportunities for a younger generation that's hungry for purpose, not just a paycheck. Lastly, none of this can be done alone. Governments, private companies, and local communities need to work together. Public-private partnerships, when done right, can deliver results faster, smarter, and at scale. Because at the end of the day, the solutions are there. The tools exist. What Canada needs now is focus, cooperation, and the courage to act. Not for headlines, but for real, lasting change. From the soaring cost of living to the silent crisis of disconnection, this is the Canada you rarely see in brochures or bucket lists. A country often celebrated in travel documentaries for its beauty, safety, and opportunity is now facing a quiet reckoning where homes are harder to find, wages struggle to keep up, and entire generations begin to question whether they still belong. We've uncovered the facts: rising homelessness, unaffordable housing, stagnant wages, and mental health concerns, all signs of a system under pressure. Political delays, strained infrastructure, and unchecked speculation have made everyday life harder for many. But beneath the headlines, the real loss may be the one we don't see: the slow fading of community. And this isn't just Canada's story. It's a reflection of what many countries face when growth outpaces care. If this story offered a new perspective or made you see the world a little differently, feel free to share your thoughts below. And if you're drawn to stories that reveal not just where to travel, but why it matters, we'd be honored to have you join us. Because sometimes, the most meaningful journeys don't just show you new places, they help you see familiar ones more clearly.